two parts to the paper. First, we are going to document the overall housing market, some variables that we think are very important. So we are going to do it in a very traditional macro way about the cyclical property, like looking at the variance, covariance, and the persistence. Okay, it's a very old-fashioned way of documenting what is going on, the cyclical properties. And the variable we are interested in are sales, new listing, okay? So what is being listed for sale, time to sell, number of houses for sale, and prices. So that, in the literature, some of this has been documented, but I would say new listing and house for sale are the two very important new variables. Then what we are going to do is to do a variance decomposition, basically to look at the volatility. And what we are going to argue is that for two important variables, house for sale. So house for sale we think is an important variable because think about the labor market when we say unemployment is an important variable because we think of the bunch of people, they are there waiting for opportunity to put their whatever human capital have into action. So similarly, house for sale is like there are these property out there waiting for someone to enjoy utility out of that house for sale. So that's important. And when we do the decomposition for house for sale, we find that both the inflow, the listing rate, and outflow rates are important. So it's about half-half. So inflow, outflow is a very similar concept as the labor market. So what you think of that, suppose there's a pool of house for sale. So inflow is houses being listed for sale, okay, because it's coming into this pool. Outflow is houses that is being sold, coming out. So of course, the volatility of this pool depending on the volatility of these two rates. So what we find is, first, the volatility of the pool is upcounted by half-half, okay? Second, we find that if you say, I don't really care house for sale, I actually only care about sales volume because that's usually what is being reported most of the time, and that's how people think about turnover in the housing market.
Something. So I think there's a lot of evidence that a lot of the house price dynamics are at the regional level, local level. Mm-hmm. So when you say cyclical, what do you mean? Do you mean business cycles?
Business cycle. Okay. So over time. So it's like when we say GDP is volatile, sure. Consumption output co-move. That's what I mean. So the aggregate market.
But what I'm also saying is if you do a variance decomposition, right, there are many regions where all these things, for example, go up. Mm-hmm. New listings go up, time to sell goes down, sales go up, even in a recession, because it's a local kind of dynamic that's driving it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I haven't done the
aggregate. I don't know how much of the interesting stuff are we capturing because we're averaging across all those local markets, right?
Yeah. So I think so I can't say much because I didn't do it, but my general knowledge is in the old days people always think they behave very differently, but in recent decades they think of them behave more similarly. Also because there was a decline in geographic mobility. There has been a decline in geographic mobility. Okay.
And is this for the US or the UK?
For the US. So I'm going to come back to that. So when we do the sales volume, again, when you think about why is sales volume so volatile, it could again be due to either one of these two. Because it could be more volatile, maybe the sales rate, how quickly a house is being sold, is volatile. Or it could also be how many houses that is being listed for sale is very volatile. And when we do that, we find that most of it is accounted for by the inflow rate. Okay? And this is for the US data. So that's the first part of the paper. Then the second part, we use a model where we have endogenous moving, because you need that in order to get the listing variable. Okay? Otherwise, the listing variable will be exogenous. So that is one key contribution, because most of the paper in this literature on housing very often take moving as exogenous. So related to previous paper, it's like that separation rate is being treated as a parameter, whereas here, the separation will be endogenous. Okay? And then we are going to show that it kind of deliver a good fit to the relative volatility of this variable, okay? The co-movement and the persistence. And in the model, match quality is going to play an important role. And more importantly, it's not just the match quality for new. New, I mean, for those who are buying a house, how happy you are with the house that you are buying. So that's what I call new match quality. What is important is that the existing match quality is also important because that's what affects the moving decision. Okay, so that's the key here. And one interesting fact compared to the literature, well, there's not much of a literature on this. Okay, so one paper we can compare to, and I was hoping she will be here, is the paper by Antonia. Basically, in their paper, they kind of argue you can't generate the co-movement that we see. And they only look at sales, house prices, time to sell, these three main variables. And then they were saying that it's very difficult to generate the co-movement if you only have one demand shock. Okay? You need to have assumed 3 correlated shock in order to generate the pattern, the correlation matrix we see in the data. Whereas here, we only need one demand shock because the other 2 shocks will be endogenously generated by the model. So when you have one housing demand shock, the model will predict that people would like to move more often. So that itself is like a moving rate shock. And as people move often, they list their house onto the market. That would be corresponding to a housing supply shock in their model. And this decision generated the response of this shock exactly in the right direction that they needed to restrict the shock to be correlated. And that's why we can replicate the fact. So that is basically what the paper does in a nutshell.
Okay, so if I think of their paper, what's the key difference that is going to make your paper easy in that sense that with just one shock, it's going to be enough to...
Yes, because of this decision that individual can choose whether to move or not.
But in this case, they also have endogenous... Oh, no.
Not destruction. No, yeah. All right, so let's go to the data. Yes?
So sales, so all outflows are sales. So I'm thinking of, say, delisting without sales.
Sorry?
So sometimes you...
Oh, the withdrawal. Yeah, that would be an issue, but we can't account for that. So we don't know whether it's... but let me go to the data maybe then. Yeah. So the data we have is that... this is another thing we're quite happy about because basically we only have 2 sources. One source is for the house price. Okay, that's a house price many people use. So this is purchase only. So it started in 1991. And it's for single family house. Okay, single family home. Okay. The quantity and every non-price variable are created from this one data source. Okay? Whereas in their paper, they get data from different sources. So where here, everything is created from 2 series coming from the NAR. One series is the monthly sales, how many houses is being sold in a month, and the inventory at the end of the month.
By location or just the entire?
Aggregate. So to be honest with you, I would very much to do it because they have it by 4 division. And so the story goes like, so they had the sales by 4 division publicly available. And then, so I thought then they must also have inventory by 4 division. So at least I can do the 4 division US housing market. So since the beginning of this project in year 2012, I've been emailing this guy and he's been telling me it's going to be made publicly available very soon. And then 2 months ago, I sent the same email and the guy has left. And someone else replied me, still they haven't done it. So I want to, but I haven't been able to. So I guess I could use very micro data to look at a smaller area, like some of the other paper used on listing and everything. But we haven't done that. Okay, so this is just for the aggregate US housing market. I don't know, maybe we still learn something from it. Most of the facts are quite consistent with what other people find. So what we are going to do with these two numbers is that we have the stock and we have the outflow. Okay? Then if you use an accounting relationship, suppose withdrawal is not a big issue, then I can back out the inflow. So that is a very strong assumption, but that's the best we can do at this point. So we constructed the inflow because we see how inventory change and how many are sold. So that's basically the exercise. So we get this listing variable. And with that, you can construct inflow rates, outflow rate, etc. So here are the facts, based on what we have here. You have sales, price, new listing, home for sale, and time to sell. The first row is the relative volatility. So it's very much like what we do in macro. We treat sales as we normalize that to 1 and look at all the other variables relative to sales. So what is in the housing market is price is volatile compared to GDP, but less volatile compared to sales. New listing is a bit more volatile than sales. House for sale is also volatile. And time to sell is the most volatile variable.
So that's not detrended, or?
It's not detrended. We have the detrended one in the last table. So we have that.
Everything is driven by the housing bust, I guess, right? So it's all like one big swing in these 10 years.
It's not true. So if you look at the paper, appendix table, it's there. Because in a way, we first did the detrended one, just like Antonio, they have the detrended table. Then we've been keep thinking between us, is it reasonable to detrend? Like for macro variable GDP, we know there's a clear trend for more than 100 years. So naturally, you would detrend. But we don't know. We don't have a specific model of housing market over the long run. Like transaction, why should transaction has a trend? That's not clear. So that's why, but the model, the table for detrended is in the paper. And a lot of these phenomenon I talk about is the same.
But what I mean is that basically, so what these variables look like, if you plot them in a time series, it's probably
they
swing, right?
So it's quite, okay, if you look at the low frequency, it's quite flat up to about mid-90, and then they all go up between 95 to about 2004, 2005, and they all came down, down, I mean, time to sell, of course, go up, okay? So there is this kind of, we can say medium run trend if you want to, but we try to do the HP filter just like Diaz and Jerez, and we had that table in the paper. But I don't want that to take away the...
But it's probably fair to say that the housing bust of the end of the sample drives most of these covariances, right? Just to know where they come from, because before there weren't many recessions in your sample, right?
Okay. So I guess one way is to stop.
Which is fine, right? So
okay, I can do a different time period. That I didn't do. Yeah, I only did detrend versus not detrend. This is a not detrended one. But a lot of these positive, negative is the same. And persistence is the same.
I have to time to read it. What is the U variable that you could
Okay, sorry.
On the previous slide.
U, okay, this is almost like I, but this is just a little bit geeky because I is at the end of the month. So we are thinking, if you come in during the month, what's the number of, what's the average stock of house? So this is really house for sale, and this is inventory at the end of the month. So this is constructed by assuming, suppose this listing happened uniformly within the month, what would have been the UT for that month? So this is very geeky, but they turn out to be 0.99 correlated.
And then I'm not sure I understand the relative standard deviation on the next slide.
Okay.
Because of the order of magnitude is so different, like the time to sell, for instance, is versus...
So this is, you can think of it, so this is just a standard way of thinking of the relative standard deviation. So the mean is being taken out. It's just percentage change around its mean.
You divide by the mean.
Yeah, so it's relative standard, yeah. So it's the same unit, yeah.
What is a unit of observation?
Sorry?
What is a unit of observation?
Neighborhoods. Units. So first is monthly data.
Right.
And then we convert it to quarterly data just
But you
to
have one observation
per month. Per month. Yeah, they are monthly data. Aggregate. Awesome. So that's the first thing. What I want you to take away for the first line is that, we talk a lot about price. If you detrend it, it will be a much smaller number here. But the other variables are also volatile. Okay, so that's the first message. Second is the co-movement. Okay, so and some of them are quite well known. Sales and price are highly positively correlated. Okay, during the good times, price is higher, sales is also higher, and they perform together. So that's the same as what other people find. Sales and time to sell is negatively correlated. So when they say it's a highly liquid market, sales is higher and price is higher. So that's also very similar to what other people find. What is new is this listing variable. So as it turned out, listing is also highly positively correlated with sales. So when there's time that a lot of sales is happening, a lot of people is also putting their house up for sale. And
It's going by construction.
Huh?
It's by construction, because if you move to the previous slide, you're dividing U by yes, and then you get a negative correlation. It's the way you build this variable to make this correlation to appear, then it has to be, and you cannot be otherwise.
But these are independent data, right? IT is an independent data series.
But N is correlated with S.
I is much bigger number than S. Remember, this is inventory, and this is S, sales. So I don't know. I don't think it's by construction, but maybe. So that's the second fact. So basically, we find these two new variables. They also co-move. Yeah.
But if you move from one house to the other, you buy a house, you sell a house, doesn't that create kind of...
That's precisely our point. You need that. You need the moving decision to get that positive co-movement. And that's basically precisely our point regarding to the previous paper. When you don't have that decision, it's almost impossible for them to get this correlation right, unless they make this additional. So what they need in order to explain the positive correlation between price and sales, they need high housing demand shock is correlated with high moving rate shock and high housing supply. So they need these three things to be correlated. But what we are saying is these three things can be endogenously correlated because people are making the decision to move, exactly like what you observed.
It doesn't sound very surprising to me.
It is not surprising, but it hasn't been done. Yeah.
But the new listings would also include new constructions, right? That would be new listings.
There's no construction here. So now, things is, I should have emphasized this. This NAR data is for existing single-family home. So this by construction exclude new construction. So sales does not include sales of newly constructed home.
But like from 91 to 2012, the houses that were constructed in that period?
There are constructions, so it could affect the data. Suppose there's a newly constructed house being sold, and then during this period they are being resold. So that could be there in the trend. Yeah.
So you don't have the data? That's the reason?
In a way, well, it's difficult to think how to add them in. You know what I'm saying? By construction, this is excluded. That's for existing home. But then in year, for example, 2000, it could be a house that's been constructed in year 1995. So you have to keep track how often this new, maybe I guess I could make some assumption how often they are being, and then see how they enter into it. So, but it's a little bit tricky how to take care of that.
Do you know what fraction of the listed homes today in the US are newly built versus existing? Especially in part of this period, at least in the US, we saw lots of new construction.
Yeah, so I guess that's a, yeah, I could try to find out. So basically the question is, suppose this is the observation in year 2000. If I look at the age of this house, then I could back out. but they, well, at least the way I know their data, they do not report such a thing. But I could look at the overall census, American Housing Survey and see the age, and look at the fraction, maybe the proportion. Yeah, that's something that could be done. Okay?
Sorry.
Yeah.
If maybe some minor thing, but if you're renting a house before and now you decide to sell it, you're not moving, but it's kind of an outflow of houses from the pool.
So if it's a houses that, no, not rent to own margin, not much.
It's not big.
Well, okay, so later on, I will come back to this point. Can I come back to this point later on? I do have a slide on that. Okay, the last one is the persistent. So basically, these are quarters. So this tells you that all these variables are quite persistent. Okay, so this is the last bit to notice. Okay, so that basically summarizes what I said. They co-move, they're volatile, and yeah, that's it. So then I'm going to do a decomposition, okay, to say, given these variables are so volatile, which decision is more important? Because the literature basically focuses 99% on the sales decision. So all these papers about liquidity, mortgages, and many of these components, pricing strategy, directed search, etc., they're all about how quickly is a house being sold and what is the price of the transaction. Okay, so it's all about the outflow margin. And everybody assumes inflow is exogenous. Okay, that's an exogenous breakup. So of course, that approach will be justified if inflow is not important. Okay, so that's basically the objective here. With these limited data, can we learn something about it? So it's going to be assumed to be these two states. Okay, house that is either for sale or not for sale. So someone is living there. This is the inflow into for sale, and this is the outflow. Okay. So we want to say what drives the volatility? Is it because the changes in the difficulty of selling houses, which is the sales rate most people analyze? Or is it the changes in the number of houses being put up for sale, which is being taken as exogenous in the data, in the literature? So we are going to do something very similar to what has been done for the labor market. There, they also face some of this difficulty, say restricting to only two states without that third state. Okay, you might be going in from rental market, like a worker could be discouraged, withdraw from the labor market and come in. So that's a restriction. And new houses also represent a small fraction of what is being seen here. So transaction of new houses is only 6% of the total sales in this data, and it's only 5% of the inventory. Okay, so we hear a lot about these construction boom and etc. But when you actually look at the sales data, they are a small fraction. Okay, I'm not saying that definitely means that they are not important, because they could be the marginal whatever, but that's the only thing I can say now. In terms of between rental market and owner-occupier houses, which is the question before, I guess I have two observations. One observation is an empirical paper basically say that these are like two different segments. Houses that is for rent and houses that is for sale are quite different. People who wanted to rent and people who want to buy are very different people. In fact, well, at least in London, if you go to an estate agent, they first ask you, do you want to rent or buy? And then they will send you to different office. So they will have an office that's for rental and an office that's for rent. Even if you go online, the first question, do you want to rent or buy? And then you're being directed to different sessions. So in a way, the arbitrage between these two might not be so important concern. Then this paper, you could switch, but yeah. But this paper might be more relevant because what they do is they actually calculate the flow, okay, using the method that had been done in the labor market, okay, which is to see how many, what is the movement between rent to own to rent, and own to own. And their conclusion is also that these are very volatile. The turnover rate is very volatile, but the volatility is mainly driven by within each segment. Okay. Yeah.
So maybe it's not of first order when you look at the first transaction, but when you're not in the steady state, you're in the transition to a different steady state. Then you introduce new houses. Then if they're transacted like 5 times a year, it multiplies with 5.
It could. It could be. It could be. So what I'm saying is, I haven't done it. This is the first, attempt to put all these together in a one model and incorporate this decision. So we haven't been explore all these exciting dimensions yet. We might, it's a preliminary version. It's the second time I'm presenting it. So we could, it might come in later on. All right. So this slide is basically the same as the 2 paper, the Petrangelo-Pizzaridi and Fujita and Raimi paper, basically into computing this rate and then plotting them. So the blue line is the outflow rate, so basically the sales rate. The red line is the inflow rate. So they are both very volatile. Then the exercise is basically to see what drives the volatility in the house for sale and in sales volume. Okay, so that's basically the exercise. So we follow what they do. I don't want to go through the detail. The bottom line, the basic message is, for the house for sale, if we do exactly what they do, we find that the inflow rate accounts for 91%, outflow rate accounts for 9%. For the sales volume, the inflow rate is 98%, and the outflow rate is 2%. Now, this exercise, what they did, relies a lot on the transition happened very fast. Now, in the housing market, it also happened very fast because if you look at the law of motion, the transition rate is basically S plus N, the sales rate plus the inflow rate. If you think about average time house stay on the market is 2 months or something like that, then the transition is very fast. Most of the transition happen in 1 year. So a steady state decomposition is not bad. But still, we can consider cases, suppose we exclude those a bit too far from the steady state, then does that change the result? So when we do that, for house for sale, it does make it more half-half, okay, which surprisingly is like what Fujita and Raimi found for labor market. Both inflow, outflow account for about half. But for sales volume, it's still the same. Okay, it's still robust, 98 versus 2%. So basically, that's the message. So with the limited data, with this first attempt, we argue inflow rate is important. And also maybe like Vincent says, it's pretty obvious it should be important. Because in the housing market, we do see a lot of them are previous owner-occupier. But that exercise is just to demonstrate that you could, with limited data, limited tool, we can still show some number. Okay? So that is basically the motivation of putting them in this decision and look at the implication on this. So the model is going to be very close to our other paper, which is called Moving House. So we have a companion paper, which is called Moving House. It's very similar to that model. It's trying to keep everything simple, given the data we have. So this is going to be a unit family. Basically, the size of the family, size of house is fixed. No new houses, no new entrance. Everything is just like that. Houses is either occupied or for sale, like that 2 boxes I drew earlier on. So you have measure of buyer, B, and measure of seller, U. So these are people who are unsatisfied. They own a house, but they are not happy living there. And because the market is, self-contained, no new houses, no new buyer, so B have to equal to U. So what does it say is that tightness, the usual variable, labor market tightness, here you can think of housing market tightness, will not play any role because by construction it's going to be 1 all the time. There will be 3 decision makers. You have homeowner who has to make this moving decision when they should move. You have the buyer who basically have to decide whether to buy certain house at a particular price, and you have the seller. Where are the search friction come from? Now there will be 2 Yeah.
You can have one house at most, right?
You can own more than one. Here we don't have liquidity constraint, we don't have mortgage concern. So that is not, you can think of, if you bought one and you haven't sold your old one, we say there's a perfect capital market there. You can, yeah. It's a crazy assumption, but that's how it is now. Okay? So the two types of friction is the following. So think about yourself when you decided to buy your first house or even to move home. What do? Well, first, you have to go onto some website or go to your local estate agent, sort out a bunch of houses that satisfy some sort of minimum requirement. Okay, so this is about locating. What do you want to locate? Maybe you are looking for a 3-bedroom house in Barcelona, a particular street. Okay, so you first sort this out, then you get a choice. That's the first friction, locating them. Okay? In modern day, it might not be as difficult because we have the internet. You could type in and things come out immediately. Once you locate them, then you will call up the estate agent and say, I want to see this and that and that. Okay? So this is the second type of friction, which is you might not like whatever is being located. So in this, viewing play an important role. So in the other paper, I think I didn't have it here. In the other paper, we have some data for the viewing per cell for the US and for the UK. And the number there is basically show viewing per cell is about 10. Meaning on average, people look at 10 houses before they buy the one, or a house is being viewed 10 times before it is being sold. Okay? So viewing is a very important component. I don't know, you might have your own personal experience when you decided to buy. You can ask yourself how many you have viewed before you make that decision. The point is just that this match quality is very important in the housing market. Okay? You don't just buy the one that you locate. You buy the one that you like. Okay? And the threshold can be different depending on market condition. Sometimes you might be more picky, sometimes you might be less picky. Yes, that's why it is important.
But in your model, there will be everybody will know what's the price that corresponds to a certain characteristic of fundamentals.
But that's match specific. So if you and I look at the same house, you might like it a lot, and I might not like it. So that information of how much you like, I might not care. I just care about on average. Okay, what is the value out there?
And everybody knows the value on average.
Yes, that would be the outside option. I come to that slide, okay? So here is still at the stage about just documenting what kind of friction it is. Is that first you are not sure how long it takes to locate one. Second is once you locate, it's still not clear how many viewing you need to do before you can buy one. Okay, so of course, you will only buy when this match quality exceeds some threshold. And I will call it transaction threshold.
That's
exogenous? No, endogenous, of course, endogenous. And the price is going to be determined by some sort of Nash bargaining. And there's all these costs going on. So what's the utility, okay, if you decided to buy? It has two components. One is this match-specific one, belong to you, okay? So two people looking at the same house can have different epsilon, okay? So I might like the fact that the house is facing the back garden. You might prefer it to face the front street. Maybe you like it brighter. That's what I'm talking about match quality, okay? Very specific. And then there's common component, which later on we were going to treat as the housing demand shock. So if you build a model with two goods, housing good and non-housing goods, then anything that is happening to the economy, say your income increase, and you now look at this reduced form, so all this will be captured on that side T. So that's what the housing demand stands for. If you become richer, you put higher utility on the same match-specific housing utility. Okay, so that's basically what it is. So that would be the aggregate shock. That's what's driving the business cycle for this housing market. That thing is moving around. what is important for the moving decision is the epsilon, okay? So this is going to be a persistent variable. So what I'm trying to say is, suppose today you decided to buy a house, you go and look, okay? And then after seeing 20 houses, you buy one. And you know how happy you are. If nothing changed in your life, your happiness about that house shouldn't change, okay? But things do change in our life. And that's the idiosyncratic shock, okay? So when idiosyncratic shock hits you, the match that you thought was this happy is no longer at that level. So think about the case, maybe your office, we are located 20 minutes further away. So what you have chosen is not as good as before in terms of match quality, but you will not move just because of that. You might just put up with it. But then you will get more short, and eventually you come to a point that enough is enough. I'm going to move. I'm going to put the house on sale. And that's what we call a moving threshold. Again, it's endogenous. Yeah.
But sometimes, I mean, I can think of, you choose to have children, right?
Yes.
It's not really a shock. No?
Yes. That's why I didn't use children as my immediate example.
So then, I mean, are we missing something there by considering this a shock? Or, I mean, that in principle should also create differences.
I'm not taking a stand what exactly are these idiosyncratic shock. Later on, it will be calibrated to match the turnover rate in the housing market. But it depends on your personal view. It could be a choice. And I do hear sometimes it could be an accident too. And also more importantly, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to move. That's our key point. Whereas for the rest of the paper, they say you have to move. So let me tell you a little bit, use 1 minute. So I started writing on housing, okay, when I bought my first house. Okay, so I was happy, very happy, very happy. And then, so I had my first paper on housing. Then I had a child, okay? Then we started discussing about moving. Because obviously, the match that I thought was perfect was not that perfect anymore after a child. And indeed, I choose to have a child. But when I bought the first one, did I not think about I might have a child? I might, thought about it. But somehow I didn't feel as strong until I had the baby there in front of me. And then I look at him, I say, do I have to move? So it was a long process of decision. I had the child in 2012, and finally we decided to move and bought this new one in 2014 August. And that helped me a lot in thinking about this moving house paper. Meaning that when these things happen, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to move immediately. It depends on market condition and many things. Okay, so.
But the idiosyncratic shock is idiosyncratic in the sense that it's specific in the sense that it doesn't affect the outside value of the house.
Yeah, it's to you only.
Just to you.
But what is important is that this threshold not just depends on the idiosyncratic shock, it also depends on the market condition, what Albert was saying before. So in the other paper, we show all these cases. It could be, for example, it's a better credit market out there. It's easier for you to get loan and what we think of is an investment in match quality. When you take a move, every time you are making an investment decision. So when you want to upgrade your match quality, it's like you are investing in match quality. So that's why macro conditions matter for that decision. Okay.
What I meant by market condition is something else, which is a key thing in buying a house is learning what's a reasonable price for the kind of houses you want. And that's in practice.
Yeah, so here it's true that
you don't have that.
Yeah, so here we don't have it. Everything is fundamental. So in a way that you don't want to buy a house for the sake of just reselling it. So we don't have speculator, investor. It's purely your value. So everything is fundamental here. Yeah.
Yeah,
so maybe if we introduce investor into the model, then then this expectation about learning what the price is will matter a lot.
We choose to have children, but it's usually after other shocks, right? So it's still
Oh yeah, that was his point that we choose to have children. No, I am not particular.
It's also in part exogenous.
Yes, good. So he gave you an answer. All right, so let me move on because I saw a 5 there. That's a bit shocking. I'm in a dangerous zone. So can we talk about it later at dinner? Because now I'm very dangerous. I only have 5 minutes. So what is very important mechanism going on here is that match quality, the existing match quality. And that is going to be endogenous. So look around us. So suppose we are all homeowner and we will all have different happiness, different match quality with our house. Why? Well, there are 2 reasons. It could be when did you buy it? If you buy it at the time that you were very picky, meaning that YT, the transaction fashion, is very high, then you already start at a high level. That's the vintage effect. Second, it could be that one is more lucky than the other. I might get more shock than you. And that's why I'm relatively less happy than you. So there is 2 sources that driving this distribution changing endogenously within the model. Okay, so these are these 2 things. And what is going on with this moving decision is that it's going to generate something like a cleansing effect, like some of the investment model, meaning that only those who are relatively unhappy will choose to move. Okay? In an exogenous moving model, even if I love my house and he was just marginally happy, we have the same probability of moving. But here, he's going to move much more likely than me because of this cleansing effect. So this is something to look out for. And 5 minutes means no value function. And prices.
Can I ask you the nature of the shock? So you multiply the epsilon by the
common,
by everything,
yeah.
right? So that basically means that everybody in the economy, so you're basically scaling that across the business cycle, that everybody cares more about match quality in some times and in other times less, right?
Yeah, housing demand shock. That's basically
everyone,
how,
right? So
yeah,
that's sort of,
everyone, yeah.
Relative to the moving cost and the other stuff that's important, right?
Yeah, everyone,
So
it's a common
so
housing
then
demand shock.
Everybody will be keener on moving when that happens, right? And probably also paying higher prices. So that's
it could be. Yeah,
what,
price is going to respond, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But that's how usually people do the housing demand shock anyway, in model with or without search.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just that you want more house. You want houses. You like house more. Okay. So no time, so that you solve the steady state, and it's a very remember this distribution is evolving over time, but with 2 assumptions, we managed to track this whole thing. One is that new match quality is Pareto, okay, and second is the arrival rate of the idiosyncratic shock is Poisson, and it helps a lot. And differentiability problem, no time. Calibration is extremely nicely done, which you should really read, because there's no magic. Everything is uniquely pinned down. There's one equation for one variable. Okay, so there's no freedom. It says no arbitrage, okay, except one parameter, which is the persistent. Okay, the persistent. So the persistent parameter is a bit tricky what to do. So what we take is that we are going to give up on our prediction for house prices because there's so many exciting models out there about house prices. We might as well give up given we are only have fundamental. So what we are going to do is just take the persistent parameter to match the persistent house prices. You can show with some equation this rho exactly equal to the persistent house prices, given the model is quite simple in the house price come out of the Nash bargaining. So here are the target, and there's some explanation in the paper why it can be uniquely pinned down, no time. So result, we are going to give you some results. Okay, first, exogenous moving model, because we wanted to show that just to see how much we improve compared to previous model. So this is a special case of the model. If we just set delta to be 0, meaning when you get the shock, your match quality just go to 0. So you have to move. So the model is just like an exogenous moving model. When you do that, what you find is the model will predict price to be very volatile, listing not volatile because obvious, because it's exogenous. They don't choose, okay? So it's just only when the shock arrives, they have the choice. And because of that, you make the house for sale very volatile and the time for sale very volatile. You still get some positive correlation between price and sales, and this is quite different from Diaz and Jerez. They cannot get this in their exogenous moving model because they don't have match quality. Here we have match quality. So the YT adjusts, so we get some, but it's much smaller than the data. And with listing, this is very little because again, there's no choice. This is going to go through the mechanical way. Okay? And the worst is there's basically no persistence. It died out. Why? Oh, because when you have the when you have the shock, okay, there's more sales, but then there's there's no more houses being put up for sale. So the sales immediately dry up the stock. They run out. Okay, so this cannot last. It doesn't persist. So no time, then I just show this one. It's the benchmark model with endogenous moving. And here you see that the correlation between price and sales improve a lot, very close to data. Bring down the volatility of price, but still it's a bit too volatile compared to data. Bring up the volatility of listing closer to the data, and also bring down these two numbers. It's much more persistent because now the increase in sales volume is being sustained by people moving. So this is a good time to sell, so people decided to move more often. They put their house up for sale, so they add to the stock of house for sale, and that carry on to next period. So it supports the persistence. It propagates whatever that is the shock. Okay? So it's a pity I run out of time, which is bad. So the summary is basically from the limited data, we argue that inflow rate is very important in accounting for the volatility. And we had a way of putting all this together to show the property of the housing market, and then we show a model why this endogenous decision can help to understand this correlation matrix, even with just one shock, which is a housing demand shock. Okay, so sorry, bad time management.
Thank you.